Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm just sitting at my chair, staring out the window, admiring what I am seeing. Today it is big, chunky, grey clouds. You can't see the sun at all, so for me this is a nice day. But when there aren't clouds and I stare at the blue sky, I kind of wonder what exactly I'm looking at. I'm looking at this space that is eternal, that is timeless, is goes on forever. And I guess most of us humans look up at the sky and think, what the hell am I looking at up here? What is this place? It's when I was little, I used to think that is this universe and all the stars and everything, are we just like in a box? And then I would think, okay, well, maybe that's how it is, but what's outside this box, and what's this box made out of? And you read these near-death experiences and they say there's no such thing as time and space, and like there's so many questions for us as humans as to the creation of this planet and this universe, and why we're here, and why it was made in the first place, and who made it. Is it all an accident? Are we here by chance? Is there some purpose behind it all? And these experiences I read on a weekly basis sometimes give us a little bit of a hint or potential reason for why we are here. And sometimes the experiences will talk about creation and how it happened and why it happened. I don't know what today's experience is about. I just thought I would start with a bit of a ramble there. If you want to, before I forget, if you want to contact me, my email is podafterlife@gmail.com. It can be about anything. But yeah, I'd love to hear if you've had any spiritually transformative experiences. It doesn't have to be a near death. I mean, that'd be great if it was, but anything. Like what your relationship to God is. Have you had a spiritual awakening? What did that look like? Have you had any mystical experiences at all? Or are you just here because you're curious? I'd just like to know and hear from you guys. It doesn't matter what it's about, but for whatever reason you're here, welcome. If you're here because you're curious about what happens when you die, or you've had a nasty diagnosis lately that is terminal, or you know someone who is terminally ill, thank you for joining me, and hopefully this podcast can give you some comfort / answers / hope in regards to your situation, no matter what that situation is. But this experience today is a short one, so it's not going to take up too much of your time. It is from the endearth.org website, and it is from someone called Joschua B. Joschua B. Let's get into it. When I was younger, my parents were both working full-time jobs. My father was stationed at Fort Bliss, and my mother worked various defence or education-related jobs. Thus, I was placed into a summer youth program. I was one of the younger, if not the youngest child on the program. One summer day, they took us to a public pool. Most of the kids, being older and more experienced with swimming, were at the deeper end of the pool, leaving me alone. I remember wanting to join them and went under the floating barrier to swim towards them. I remember not being able to feel the bottom of the pool with my feet and slipping under the water. I felt fear. I remember reaching towards the light of the sun shining through the water and suddenly being above the water. I could see myself under the water, and I remember feeling no attachment to the body. I floated higher and higher above the scene and could see a great part of the city below me. I still had a human form while floating up. It was like a ghost body. I remember looking up into the sky and then being somewhere else. This place was like being in space except with no stars. Wherever this somewhere was, I had no human form. I was like a small ball of yellow light. Though in darkness, I knew I could see in all directions, all at once. Around me appeared other orbs of light. The orbs were other people who had passed away. We all glowed with different shades of light. Some were more pink, some were blue, and I was yellow. I remember that all of our thoughts flowed into and out of each other simultaneously. Despite this, I could still process my own thoughts. I knew that the lady near me was in her 30s, that she had died in a car accident leaving behind children, but she was at peace with the fact that her husband would care for them. I remember a great light appearing before us, like the sun but smoother and cleaner in its light. It did not hurt to look at, and regardless, we did not have physical eyes. There was the greatest feeling emanating from it. It was the greatest form of love I have ever felt, greatly beyond that of any parent, lover, or child. It was like every expression of love combined. I remember being drawn in towards it, moving faster and faster, but on the other side and moving at the speed we were. There was no real wind, just the softest of breezes. I remember knowing where I was at the time, but we do not have a word for it here in the life side. I remember feeling at home, like I had returned and I was happy. There was a sound like music, but not like music we have here on earth. It was the sound between the ringing of chimes. Some force moved through my soul and stopped me from proceeding forward. There were no words, but this kind of knowing that came back into me. It said that I needed to turn around. I remember saying that I did not want to turn around and that I was tired of having to go back so many times and ready to stay here. It said that I had not accomplished what I needed to. Before I knew it, I was tumbling through the darkness and was suddenly back over the city and drifting back towards my body. I was out of the water. I remember several of the other kids out of the water, some crying, and the female lifeguard was working on getting me back. I remember having my ghost body back and the feelings of hands pushing me on my back down into my body. The reconnection was painful. I remember feeling confined in my body. For years after this, I was depressed and wanted to go back to that place. My childhood was not the smoothest as far as my family life was concerned, and I knew if I took my own life, I could go back there. The biggest thing I learned from this experience is that God experiences itself through its creation. That is, we are all expressions of God simultaneously. I have felt in life a deep and instant connection with certain people, especially one of my friends who I also love deeply and who is currently missing. We both have talked about perhaps having met in a past life and joked about how we would meet in future lives. Though I hope my friend is found, I am confident that either way our paths shall cross again. That's the end of Joshua's experience. A little bit sad that last couple of sentences. Sounds like his good friend has gone missing and he's not sure exactly what has happened to her. So, yeah, let's hope those two reconnected and it happened in this life. But yeah, there's not too much to go into there. It's quite a simple little experience. But yeah, I'll quickly run through it and see if I can see any points I might want to dissect any further. So he's obviously swimming in a pool. He must be fairly young because the pool's sort of segregated between, it sounds like, kids who are big enough and tall enough to navigate the deep end, and those smaller ones who aren't quite able to touch the ground yet with their feet and probably also have difficulty swimming. It's a little bit weird to hear this because obviously I don't know if you can probably tell from my accent that I'm Australian, and in Australia most, well, not everyone, but most, when I'm talking from my own personal experience here, people do start to um, learn to swim from a very young age. So it's kind of strange hearing about a pool that's divided down the middle in terms of um, height and swimming ability. But yeah, I guess I don't know where Fort Bliss is, but this is where this experience happens, and maybe they have different levels of swimming education over there. But yeah, Australia being the climate that it has, lots of beaches, pools everywhere. It's a huge part of the culture in Australia is learning how to swim, and most people do manage to educate themselves on the techniques at a fairly young age. But anyway, this guy Joshua, he's in the pool. He sees these bigger kids playing around at the deep end and decides he wants to have a go up there with them as well. But as he gets closer and slips under this barrier towards the deep end, he feels like he can no longer feel the ground, and obviously he's too young to know how to swim, and that's when he goes under and starts to drown. And as this happens, he's sort of floating down to the bottom of the pool, and um, as he's looking up, he can see the sun through the water, and the next thing he knows, he is in that light the, coming from that sun, and he is risen out of his body, and he's looking at his drowning body at the bottom of the pool. So here's that point in the experience where the experiencer is no longer the human form, or it's detached itself from that human existence and gone back to its true nature. And although most people at this point of the experience are pretty confused as to what's going on and not really sure what they are or what they're seeing initially, this is generally what happens at a near-death experience. The body or the consciousness, the soul, the spirit, whatever words you use to describe that essence of who you are that has no real term. This is that point where the body and the soul separate. And I was thinking the other day, what does every living thing on this planet have a soul or some form of consciousness? Like what happens if a dog or a cat dies? Do they have a similar type of experience where they go up a tunnel and are met by other guides of a similar species, and then their life is reflected on. Is this near-death experience just a human thing, or like, and same for trees? Like, what does a tree have a soul, and what happens when that tree dies? Like, and you could go on, like insects and um, bacteria, even. Like, what at what level is a being um, evolved enough to possess a soul that has this experience? Like, because there's so many different living things on this earth, and according to these experiences, we're all made of that same fragmentation of God. So, yeah, I'm just curious to know what would happen to other living forms on this planet when they also die, because we're human beings, which granted is a pretty incredible miraculous form to be taking on this planet. It's the most, I don't know, intellectually advanced, I guess, but that's about it really. And there's other smart animals out there. There's dolphins, there's gorillas, and whales. I don't know how big whales' brains are, but they're probably fairly large. So that's, although we are an amazing species, that's all we are. We're not that different from all these other animals that occupy this earth. So I'm just curious as to what the dying process is for other beings, and is it a similar type of experience to what a human goes through. Nonetheless, I guess these are questions that will be answered eventually when we can see this life we're having from a different perspective, and we're no longer in this human body, and we're able to get these answers that people get when they cross over, but for whatever reason aren't able to bring the answers to all of life's big questions back. Some do, but most kind of get this veil put back on them, and they don't remember exactly why we are here. So Joshua's there, he's floating in his ghost body, and he feels like he's in this new space where there's no stars, but it feels like he is in space. So when I read that line, this place was like being in space except with no stars. I kind of think that when we cross over to this, when we become the consciousness that we are rather than the consciousness inside a human body, this whole universe is going to look very different. I think the way we perceive this universe through the human eyes we look at it with, it's it the the human eye is obviously built on this three-dimensional physical realm and sees everything in that way. But if we were to look at this 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 place through soul's eyes, it probably would appear very different, and we would see things that we don't see with our human eyes, that's for sure. So this is what's happening with Joshua. He's in this space. He feels like he's in this space, but there's no stars around. So he's in, I guess, what some people would describe a kind of void. It's just blackness, it's darkness, and he doesn't say whether he's scared, but he just realizes he has no human form anymore, and he's just a small ball of yellow light. And he goes into a little bit here of how his vision works. he can see in all directions. That's up, down, back, forward, left, right, simultaneously. And around him, he can see other orbs of light, and he realizes what these lights or orbs are. They're just other people who have passed on. But these orbs are all in different colors, and he notices that communication in this dimension is the usual telepathic form rather than words, and they can communicate with each other simultaneously, and the number of people there is irrelevant. Communication can be conducted regardless. So in this realm, he sees this other light, and this he recognizes this light to be a woman who has been in her 30s, and he instantly is able to read her situation and why she's there. And in her case, she has died in a car crash, and she's kind of thinking about the kids she's left behind, but she's comfortable with where she's at. She's happy to be in this other dimension because she's at peace now, and she knows that her husband will be left behind on Earth to take care of the kids. So in his case, there's no guide or loved ones that he knows. That he's in this dimension of being around these lights. He doesn't have a clue who they are, but he is able to communicate with them once they become aware of each other, and he can delve into a bit of their Earth history. But yeah, a little bit different in terms of his experience here, and not getting a guide or a spiritual master to grade him and welcome him into this next realm. But it's still, yeah, I guess, yeah, it's interesting because he seems like he doesn't say his age, but he seems like he's a fairly young kid, and to have an experience like this is a little bit concerning, to think that there's no relatives or um, God-like light to greet him at this initial stage. But just as I say that, I start to read the next paragraph, and it actually goes into, I guess, God appearing before him. This form God takes, I'm assuming it's God. Does he use the word God? No, but he uses the word great light, which is often what people use to describe God. Did not hurt to look at this light. This light had feelings emanating from it. These feelings were like love, way, way, way beyond the love that we experience as humans, regardless of what that love is, whether it's a love of something you love to do, whether it's a love of a child, a parent, a lover. This love that is emanating from this light is no comparison. It beats the love we feel here, hands down. And as this light appears, they start moving at a great speed. There was no wind, just the softest of breezes. So it's interesting that they experience movement in this other dimension, and there's no resistance, but they still have sensations like a soft breeze blowing on them. And he feels like he has returned home once this light appears and they start moving towards it. And then he says he hears a sound like music, but not music that we have here on Earth. So when they, often from other experiences I've read, when they hear music in this other realm, it's different. They experience it, they feel it, they see it, they taste it. It's a different kind of music, because music here on Earth is powerful, but and it does influence our emotions and our feelings and our inner state. But when they go to this other realm, often people come back and say music was just beyond comprehension to how we experience here on earth. But if it's, I guess it's just another example of the 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 limited experience we have on earth, and in this other dimension it can be so much more multifaceted. It's a bit like the love we have here is amazing, it's intense, it's awe-inspiring, but when they go to this next dimension, it's next level. And same with music, like same thing really. It can really move you here on earth, and help you out a lot, and bring you joy. But once it is experienced as pure consciousness, it takes you to a whole different place. But in this case, he doesn't talk about what the music was like in terms of it offering this multi-dimensional experience. He says it's different to the music we have on earth, and the way he describes it, he says it was like the sound between the ringing of chimes. So when I read that, I kind of think of some Buddhist and Eckhart Tolle YouTube videos I've listened to, and meditation and that sort of thing, where they ding the bell, and you put all your awareness, all your focus into listening to that sound slowly start to diminish until there's pure silence. So is this what he's describing here, the silence? Because he says it's the sound between the ringing of the chime. So kind of doesn't make much sense, does it? Because the noise between the sound of the chimes making, there is no noise, it's just silence. So kind of a little bit confused by that sentence. And as he proceeds along, he feels this force move through his soul and stop him from going any further. There was no words, but he just kind of realized he couldn't experience this dimension anymore, and he was kind of reaching this point where he was no longer felt he was allowed to be where he was, and couldn't progress any further. This is similar to all those other experiences you've heard me read out. If you've explored this topic a little bit, you know what I'm talking about here. You get to that fence, that barrier, that it comes in all sorts of forms, and I guess that is the place where you can't cross over, because once you do that, there's no coming back. So in his case, there's no physical representation of this barrier. It's just a feeling he gets. There's not even any communication. He just knows he has to turn around and go back, because it's not his time to stay in this realm. And then before he knows it, he's tumbling back through the darkness, and he's suddenly back in our earth physical realm dimension, and he can see the city getting closer, and then he sees his body, and he's next thing he knows, he's the body's out of the water, and he's back in that body, and he feels incredibly confined and restricted, and it's not a nice feeling. It's quite painful, that reconnection, that re-entering of the spirit back into the body. And yeah, he's back in this dimension with you and me. That gives you a bit of an idea of what this body is like for us. There's a lack of freedom, because we are restricted by movements, and we can't just seemingly go anywhere we want and do anything we want like we can in our more pure form. And you can see why people are reluctant to want to come back into this body when they've experienced the love and the freedom they have had, when they aren't contained by it. So he says after this experience, he was very depressed and borderline suicidal, because he says his childhood was not the smoothest. Um, Take from that what you will, but obviously some experiences there that were very challenging, which is always incredibly sad to read for especially for younger people who really have no choice but to live with the family they've got and cop it if it's tough, which is horrendous. But as I say that, I kind of think we apparently can choose the families we want to carnate into, and I guess if that is true, then if we know what our parents are going to be like, and it's going to be a tough childhood, then that is what that soul wants to experience. And that is an incredibly brave thing to do if you know that the body you are going to incarnate into is likely to get some kind of suffering as a child, and that abuse in whatever form. Wow, that's incredibly brave, and it just beggars belief to think that a soul would volunteer to have a mission where childhood is it's very difficult. But these experiences often talk about us not really understanding why we have chosen the lives we do until we see it from our soul's perspective. So yeah, I don't know, but I had an easy childhood, so I can't relate, and I empathise with those who didn't. So because of this childhood, he is feeling depressed and suicidal, and obviously having this experience it's like a double-edged sword. He's grateful for it because he knows that this is where he comes from, and he gets to return there to this place of love and light. But at the same time, it's harsh because he knows it's there, and he's in this darker type dimension of experiencing life as a human on planet Earth. So yeah, he kind of wants to go back there, but he's kind of glad to know that it is there, and to have had the evidence of its existence, which a lot of people do. I think I personally have had some mystical experiences that prove to me um, this love type place is real, but never to the extremities of a near-death experience. So yeah, I can relate to what this guy's saying here. He's grateful, but he's also um, it's kind of difficult because he could just go back there at any time, but feels that he has this mission to complete as a human. And he ends by saying that the biggest thing he learned from this experience is that God experiences itself through creation. That is, we are all individual fragments of God, and God is therefore experiencing itself simultaneously. Heard this many a times as well, that all these souls that we are just an individualized portion of God, and therefore what we're doing, what we're seeing, what we're doing is God experiencing itself. So when you see that bird flying through the park or dog running around the block, it's the same thing. It's the same thing in them that's in us, and therefore it must be God experiencing itself in different forms. But when I look at this, I always think, and I say this on a regular basis, so for those of you who listen regularly, I apologise for repeating myself, but there's only a certain number of talking points that these experiences raise, and often I will end up repeating myself. But yeah, what is this individual portion of God? That's what I'm saying here. Is it ours to keep, so to speak? Is it ours to go and choose our next adventure after this one? Like, is it ours to go and choose what it can do in the next realm? Or is it just a piece of God that eventually goes back to the whole and connects to that source again and just disappears into the infiniteness of God, or do we keep this little individual piece of soul that we have inside us and get to go on the adventures we want to? Yeah, some experiences will be varied on that answer. Some will say we return to this oneness, and others say we kind of do keep an individual portion of who we are, and we are able to learn from the experiences we have and take this into our next experience when we reincarnate again or go off on our next adventure in this other realm. Yeah, it's a mixed answer, and so I can only go off what I have learned from these experiences, and that is, I don't know the answer to that question. It's probably a bit of both. So yeah, the very last bit, he talks about this friend who is missing and the past lives, and talks about reincarnation, and yeah, so I don't know if you believe in reincarnation or not. I guess that kind of would be the answer to the question I just posed. If there is such a thing as reincarnation, then we definitely would keep our individual nature or the soul that we have inside us now. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe reincarnation isn't such a good thing. Like, is it good to continuously come back to a human type experience, or would you rather just chill in this loving peace forever? It's I can see arguments either way. The loving peace forever sounds very appealing from a human perspective, but from a soul living in that loving comfort, maybe a change would be nice, and that's perhaps why we're all here right now, to experience a bit of darkness and freedom from relentless love and light, as crazy as that sounds, but it's possible. It's possible. All right, people, I will leave it there. Just kind of had a bit of a thought there, though, like in terms of that, what I was just talking about, whether we're individual souls or whether we merge back into the oneness. I guess either way, I guess we can't lose, because we're either this individual soul or we're God itself, or we're both. So whether you go back to this individual nature that's able to pick and choose what it does next, or you go back into this oneness of God, either way, you're kind of choosing what you're going to do next. I don't know how that works, but yeah, whether we're the oneness of God or an individual portion of God, they're both God. So it's both pretty cool, isn't it? Thank you for listening. I love you all. I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Goodbye.